She was just 16, and that motel room was the only place that didn't ask her where she'd come from, or who she was running from. The neon sign outside flickered like it was breathing, half lit, half tired, just like her. The manager didn't look up when she slid the wrinkled bills across the counter. He only handed her a room key, attached to a wooden block that smelled faintly of cigarettes and old varnish. Room 6, around the back. She carried a backpack and a baby wrapped in a faded green blanket. The baby hadn't stopped crying since the greyhound dropped them off. She'd tried everything. A bottle she warmed against her own chest. A lullaby her mama used to hum before everything went wrong. But that tiny body just shook and sobbed like it knew too much for something so small. Inside the room, the light flickered once and settled into a low hum. The bedspread had tiny red flowers, faded into rust. She placed the baby down gently, then sat on the edge, trying to be still, trying not to fall apart. She hadn't even named him. Not yet. Back home, if you could still call it home, folks whispered behind hands. The preacher's daughter. A mother at 16. Abandoned. Her own mama wouldn't look her in the eye after the belly started showing. And the boy who gave her the baby? He left a note, not a word. But here, in this silence, no one judged her. She rocked gently, arms empty now, watching the ceiling fan turn in slow circles. Outside, a storm was gathering. She heard the soft crackle of thunder somewhere far off, and the baby finally quieted, just long enough for her to close her eyes. That was when she heard it. A knock, soft, uncertain, from the room next door. Then footsteps, slow, heavy, heading away. She didn't know then that the man in room 7 would change everything, that he carried a silence even heavier than hers, that his whole life was made of closed doors, locked gates, and one letter he never got to send. But that night, she only knew this. They were two strangers in a motel, each holding something broken, and before the sun rose, one of them would make a choice that would echo for 20 years. If you've ever felt the world gave up on someone too soon, then sit with me a while, sugar. This story is about lost babies, found hearts, and a second cradle. The first thing she noticed was the smell, not from her room, but through the thin wall they shared. It was something warm, familiar, like stew, or maybe roasted chicken. Whatever it was, it reminded her of Sunday dinners long before the shame, when her mama used to hum in the kitchen and her daddy's laughter filled the house. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until that moment. Her stomach ached, but she wouldn't leave the baby. He was sleeping now, finally, curled up like a comma on the pillow beside her, his tiny chest rising and falling, fists tight under his chin. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. He looked just like his father in sleep. Same dark lashes, same stubborn set of the mouth. She didn't let herself cry. Instead, she pressed her ear to the wall, listened. The man in room 7 didn't make much noise. No TV, no music, just the occasional creak of the floorboard, the soft thunk of a drawer closing, and, once, what sounded like a quiet, deliberate exhale. The kind people make when they're trying not to feel something. She didn't know anything about him. Not yet. Only that he walked slow and cooked real food. And knocked once, for some reason, on her wall. Then walked away like he changed his mind. What she didn't know was that he'd been listening too. He'd heard the baby crying all night. Heard the soft pleas of a girl who hadn't been a girl in months, whispering lullabies into the dark like a prayer. And something about that sound unsettled him. He didn't like feeling anything anymore. His name was James, 59 years old, rich enough to disappear, alone enough to prefer it that way. The motel was a stopover. He'd driven past the coast, past the homes he once owned, past the cemetery where the name Sarah Lynn Parker had been carved 15 years ago. He hadn't planned to stop in that nowhere town. But grief doesn't run on gas, and when he saw the motel's flickering sign, something in him gave out. So he took room 7 and told himself he'd leave in the morning. But he didn't leave because of the baby, because of the girl, because of something he couldn't explain. Not then. That night he sat by the window with a tin plate in his lap. Chicken stew, his own recipe, made in the little kitchenette he always kept stocked. Old habits from a time when he cooked for someone else. He almost knocked again, to offer her a bowl, but he didn't. He just sat there, watching the rain crawl down the glass, listening for the baby's breath through the wall, and that's when he heard it. Not crying, not laughter, something worse. A thud, then silence. Then the girl's voice, sharp, panicked, cracking like old wood. Please, please wake up. No, no, no. And James dropped the plate without even realizing it was falling. James didn't knock this time. He opened his door so fast, the hallway light stung his eyes. The carpet was damp from the rain, and room 6's door was still open. Just a crack. But he could hear her breathing inside, fast and ragged, and something else. No baby crying. That silence hit him in the chest harder than anything ever had. He didn't ask if he could come in. He just pushed the door open gently and stood there. The room smelled like formula and panic. She was on the floor, crouched over the baby, hands shaking so bad she couldn't get the zipper of the diaper bag open. The baby was limp, not lifeless, but far too still, and his lips were a shade too pale. James saw it all in an instant, like a snapshot he couldn't look away from. "Is he breathing?" he asked. Her eyes flew to his, big wild eyes full of terror and disbelief. She was young, younger than his own daughter had been when, well, that didn't matter now. I don't know. He was fine, and then her voice broke into sobs. "Let me see him," James said, kneeling down beside her. She didn't answer, but she didn't stop him either. He touched the baby's chest, felt for movement, then pressed his ear close, still breathing, shallow but steady, feverish. James took off his flannel shirt, folded it, and tucked it under the baby's head. "We need to cool him down," he said. "Fast. Do you have any medicine?" She shook her head. "Of course not. No car. No money. Just a backpack and desperation." James stood up, already heading toward the door. "I'll be back in 5 minutes. Don't move him." She looked up, stunned. "Why are you helping me?" He paused in the doorway. He could have said anything, could have lied, given her a polite shrug, or told her it was nothing. But instead he looked at her, the way no one had in months. Not with pity, not with shame, but with something steadier. "I lost a child," he said, and then he left. It was 5 minutes, like he promised. Maybe less. He came back with infant Tylenol, a damp cloth, and a paper cup of ice from the vending machine. She watched in silence as he showed her how to cool the baby down, how to count his breaths, how to hold him just so. The baby whimpered once, then again, then finally let out a weak little cry, and she broke down completely. James didn't touch her, just sat nearby, quiet and solid, like a tree in the middle of a storm. She told him her name eventually, Lena, and he told her his, James. She didn't ask for his story. He didn't offer it. But when the baby finally fell asleep in her arms and the fever had passed, James stood up and turned to leave. At the door, he stopped. "I have stew," he said. "Real food. If you're hungry." She hesitated, looked down at her baby, then nodded. "Okay," she whispered. He brought the food in 2 bowls, warm, hearty, enough to feel like someone cared, even just for one night. They ate in silence. She sat on the edge of the bed. He took the armchair by the window. The rain hadn't stopped, but inside the room there was a strange peace, the kind that only comes after fear. She didn't know yet that the man who fed her was once a millionaire with everything and nothing, and he didn't know yet that the girl holding that child was about to return a letter that never should have been lost. Sometimes comfort comes in the shape of a stranger. Sometimes healing begins with a bowl of stew. The baby was asleep, tucked up beside Lena, still wrapped in that green blanket. It was worn thin in places, stitched here and there with mismatched thread, little signs that someone had once tried to care for it. Maybe a grandmother, maybe Lena herself, clumsy and determined. James sat back in the armchair, bowl empty, hands folded. He didn't speak much, didn't fidget, just sat, like he'd made a life out of waiting. Lena didn't know why she trusted him. She'd grown up around men who raised their voices too fast, took what they wanted too easily, and walked away without looking back. But James didn't ask anything of her. He just brought warmth, and that, somehow, was enough. but the silence between them had a weight. Lena broke it first. "I didn't mean to read it," she said quietly. "The letter." James looked over slowly. His face didn't change, but something in his eyes, like a shutter, creaked open. "What letter?" she swallowed. "There was this suitcase, left on the bench at the bus station in Greenville, just sitting there for hours. People kept walking past it like it was invisible." He didn't speak, just listened. "I waited, thought maybe someone forgot it, but it started raining and, I don't know. I was cold, hungry, so I opened it. There were clothes and a letter. It was old, folded over so many times the paper was soft, like it had been opened and closed 1,000 times." She paused, remembering. "It was written to someone named Sarah Lynn, from a man named James." James didn't move, not even a blink. "I didn't know it was your letter," she said. "Not then. But when I saw your name on the motel registry, I thought maybe—" Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry." The air in the room changed. Not colder, not warmer, just still. James leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Do you still have it?" Lena reached into her backpack, pulled out a small tin. She'd kept it dry, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag. As if some part of her knew it mattered, she placed it in his hands like it was something sacred. He opened it slowly. The paper trembled. Not from his hands, from time itself. He read it again. As if the words had changed in all these years. They hadn't. "My Sarah Lynn. If you're reading this, it means you never came back. And I deserve that. I was too proud, too late, too broken to show you I still had love left in me. But you were the best thing I ever had. And I hope, wherever you are, you found peace. If you ever need me, just write. I'll be waiting." James, he folded it, sat back, looked out the window into the night. "My daughter wrote to her once," he said finally. "She wanted to meet the woman I loved, the one I let slip away." He closed his eyes. But by the time the letter came back, Sarah was gone. Lena didn't know what to say. She had no way of knowing then that James hadn't spoken those words out loud in over 20 years, or that he'd never planned to open that wound again. But here, in a motel room off Highway 23, with a baby sleeping, and the scent of stew still hanging in the air, that letter found its way home. Or maybe it was guiding someone else there. And just as James folded the tin closed, his hand brushed something else in Lena's backpack. Something small and familiar. He lifted it, slowly. A locket. Gold, dented, old. He opened it and froze. Inside was a name etched in tiny letters. Sarah Lynn Parker. Sometimes it's not the past that haunts us. It's the way it loops back around and asks to be held. The moment James opened that locket, the whole room seemed to still. Lena didn't notice at first. She was folding a clean towel beneath the baby's head, humming low, like she was trying to calm herself more than him. Her hands moved gently, with the kind of care only someone very tired and very brave can give. But when she looked up, James was staring at the open locket in his hand. Not blinking, not breathing, it seemed. "You know that name," she said softly. He didn't answer. "I found it at the bottom of an old sewing tin. Mama used to keep her buttons in it." She sat back against the headboard. "I always wondered why she wore it, even when she had nothing left. We were evicted once and all she grabbed was me. And that locket." James didn't look at her. He only asked in a voice like splintered wood, "What was your mother's name?" Lena hesitated, then whispered, "Sarah Lynn." The silence that followed felt like thunder right before it hits. James stood, took a step back like the room had shifted under him. He turned toward the window, staring out like he needed something bigger than walls. Rain clung to the glass like tears that didn't know how to fall. "I thought she left me," he said, barely audible. "I thought I was too much, too cold, too closed off." "She never talked about anyone named James," Lena said, her voice small. "But sometimes I'd find her staring at the sky, humming some tune I didn't recognize, like she was remembering someone she couldn't tell me about." James closed his eyes. "I wrote her," he said, "once a year, for 15 years. Same letter. Left it in that old post box near the orchard where we first met." He paused. "She never answered." Lena looked down at the baby in her arms. "She died last spring," she said gently. "Breast cancer. Fast. She kept working through it, even when she couldn't stand up straight. I didn't know how sick she was until it was too late. She looked back up. She didn't leave you. I think she thought you had. James sat down slowly, like his bones had aged 20 years in that one moment. And then, for the first time, he wept. Not loud, not messy, but with the ache of a man who'd held too much inside for too long. The kind of grief that doesn't need words, just room. Lena didn't go to him, but she stayed. And sometimes, that's more than enough. Outside, the rain had slowed. Inside, something had shifted. Two people who weren't looking for each other had found a place to lay down the weight. But just as the quiet settled in, there was a sound at the door, not a knock, a cry. The baby, suddenly red-faced, let out a sharp, piercing scream. Lena moved quick, but James was already there, lifting him with a steadiness that surprised even her. He checked the baby's forehead, burning again. Then he noticed something else. Blood, just a drop, from the baby's nose. James locked eyes with her. This isn't normal. And somewhere deep in Lena's heart, a fear she hadn't dared name came rising fast. Sometimes the past returns in letters, but sometimes it returns in blood. The baby's name, she whispered that night, was Elijah. She said it so quietly James almost didn't hear. She hadn't told anyone before. Not her mother, not the nurses at the clinic. It was a name she carried in her heart, like a secret prayer. But now, it slipped out like a plea. His name is Elijah, she said, brushing her fingers through his damp curls. I wanted to wait until I knew he'd make it. I didn't want to name a goodbye. James didn't speak. He was too focused. The fever was rising again. Elijah's little body shook with tremors, his skin slick with sweat. The nosebleed had stopped, but something was wrong. Something more than just a passing flu. James had seen it before, years ago, with his daughter's firstborn. The doctors had called it a vascular anomaly, a fancy way of saying we don't really know. That baby had survived, but barely. Months in and out of hospitals. The memory of those nights still haunted James. The cries, the helplessness. He looked at Lena, who was trying her best not to fall apart. We need to take him to a hospital, he said. She tensed. I don't have insurance. No ID. I'm still listed as a minor, if they find out I left the county. He needs help, Lena. Real help. I know, she whispered. I don't want to lose him. I can't. James knelt beside her, not touching, just close enough for her to feel he meant it. You're not losing him. Not tonight. Duh. Lena looked up at him, her eyes wide with something that wasn't quite hope, but wasn't quite despair either. Then she did something she hadn't done since she was a little girl. She nodded and let someone else lead. The motel manager didn't even look up as they passed through the lobby. James wrapped Elijah in his coat, pressed him close to his chest. Lena walked beside them, still barefoot, her coat flapping open in the wind like wings that had forgotten how to fly. James drove an old Ford pickup. It was clean but worn, the kind of truck that had seen miles and memories. He helped Lena in, then buckled Elijah carefully into the middle seat, using a makeshift sling of blankets and his own seatbelt. The nearest hospital was 40 minutes away. They drove in silence. The only sound was Elijah's shallow breathing and the wipers sweeping away rain like old regrets. Halfway there, James glanced sideways. Lena was crying silently, one hand gripping the dashboard like it was the last solid thing in her life. He wanted to say something, anything. But instead, he reached into the glove box and pulled out a small photo. He handed it to her. A woman, young, laughing, holding a basket of apples. That's Sarah, he said. Lena held it like it was made of glass. She smiled like that, she whispered. When she sang to me at night, James nodded. She had a way of making the worst days feel small. They didn't say another word for the rest of the ride, but something had shifted again. Not in the way they looked at each other, but in the way they looked toward what was coming next. They reached the hospital just before midnight. The fluorescent lights made everything look sharper, colder. The nurse at the ER desk didn't ask many questions. She took one look at Elijah's face, and he was gone, rushed into the back by a team of nurses and one stern doctor who didn't bother introducing himself. James filled out the paperwork. Lena sat still, staring at her hands. She looked small in that plastic chair. young, but not fragile, not anymore. And when the nurse came out 20 minutes later, face drawn tight, she didn't speak to James. She looked straight at Lena and said, "There's something you need to see. Sometimes the scariest part of love is the moment right before the truth." The hallway was too white, too quiet. Hospitals always felt like that, like grief and hope were whispering to each other just behind the walls. Lena followed the nurse through a set of double doors, her boots squeaking faintly on the polished floor. James stayed behind, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, watching her disappear down the corridor like a part of his own past being carried off. The nurse led Lena into a small consultation room. There were no windows, just a metal sink, a few faded posters about vaccinations, and a clipboard resting on the table like it held the weight of the world. The doctor came in. He didn't smile, didn't sit. He looked at Lena the way people look at someone right before they break bad news. But what he said wasn't what she expected. "We stabilized him," he began. "Your son." Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "But," he added gently, "we ran standard blood panels. His fever and the nosebleed raised concerns. There's something you need to understand." He paused, and then said the words that cracked her wide open. "Elijah's blood type doesn't match yours." Lena blinked. "What?" "Your file says you're O negative. Elijah is AB positive. That's not genetically possible between a biological mother and child." She shook her head slowly, as if her ears weren't working right. No, I carried him. I gave birth to him. No one else." "We're not saying you didn't," the doctor said gently. "But we do believe there may have been an error, possibly during delivery. A switch." Lena sat down hard. The room swam, her hands curled into fists on her lap. "No," she whispered. "But the locket, the suitcase, the way the hospital she'd delivered in had been so rushed, so understaffed. She'd been alone, scared, barely conscious. No one had even let her hold Elijah for the first 12 hours. She remembered screaming, remembered asking, "Where's my baby?" And no one had answered right. The doctor placed a folder in front of her. "We need to do a second round of DNA testing to confirm. But in the meantime, there's something else." Lena looked up, her eyes glassy. "We found a medical tag inside the baby's blanket lining, sewn in, very small, likely missed during routine scans." He slid a photo across the table, a close-up of white thread, and a name embroidered in tiny blue letters, Elijah Parker Bennett. Lena's breath caught. Parker, her mother's name. And Bennett? She looked toward the hallway where James waited. "Is that his name?" she whispered. "Bennett?" The doctor nodded. Lena's hands began to shake. When she stepped back into the waiting room, James stood. One look at her face told him everything had changed. "James," she said, barely breathing, and then she held out the photo of the tag. He stared at it for a long moment, and something in him broke quietly, like glass cracking in cold water. He sank back into the chair. "My daughter's boy," he whispered. "They said he died at birth." Lena's heart stilled. "They told her it was a complication," James went on, voice hollow. She never got to see him, just the name she'd picked out. "Elijah." He looked up. "I thought he was gone." They stared at each other, not strangers anymore, not quite family yet, but connected by sorrow, by blood, by a boy who should never have been lost. Sometimes the truth finds us, not to hurt us, but to lead us home. The hospital cafeteria was empty, except for the soft buzz of a vending machine and the humming lights overhead. Lena sat by the window, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of chamomile tea she hadn't touched. James sat across from her, staring at the same folder for the third time. Elijah was sleeping now, stable, resting in a little room 2 floors above them, with monitors beeping softly, like a lullaby in code. But neither of them could rest. The folder on the table held the second set of results. Confirmed, Lena was not Elijah's biological mother, but she was something else entirely. She was the only person in the world who had loved him every single day of his life, and that mattered more than blood. Still, Lena couldn't stop shaking. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I held him. I fed him. I stayed up all night with him. He smiled when I sang. He curled into me when he cried. How can he not be mine?" James looked at her, his voice quiet. He is yours. She shook her head, bitter. Not by science. No, he said gently. By something stronger. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands folded like he was praying. Maybe he was. You loved him when no one else could. You didn't run. You didn't blame. You gave him your coat, your name, your sleep. That's not science. That's a second Cradle. Lena closed her eyes. I think I always knew, she said, somewhere deep down. He didn't look like me. He had dreams I couldn't explain. Sometimes he'd cry out at night like he remembered something from before. James looked toward the elevator. He looks like my daughter, he said softly. The way he furrows his brow when he sleeps. Sarah did the same thing. Then he smiled. Just a little. She used to say he kicked like a mule during ultrasounds. Made her crave pickles and strawberry jam. She said he'd be wild and sweet. Elijah Bennett, she said. Strong name for a soft heart. Lena looked down at the tea in her hands. I guess he was never mine to keep. James was quiet for a long time. Then he said something Lena didn't expect. Maybe he was never mine to lose. Upstairs, the nurse peeked into Elijah's room. Monitors steady, breathing soft. But then she noticed something. The other baby. The one in the NICU. Tagged Baby Boy Doe. Born the same day. He hadn't stopped crying for weeks. Wouldn't feed right. Wouldn't sleep. Until tonight. Because tonight someone had brought him an old green blanket. The one Lena had wrapped Elijah in since day one. And that baby? He was sleeping now. Like he finally remembered someone. Downstairs, Lena turned to James. I don't know what happens next, she said. He nodded. Neither do I. But I do know this, she said. That baby upstairs. Elijah. He's yours. Her voice shook. And the other one? The one they're keeping in NICU? He's mine. James nodded slowly. Then maybe we help each other figure out what to do. Lena looked up at him. You'd help me. I don't think it's helping, he said. I think it's just being there. Sometimes life doesn't give us the children we expect. It gives us the ones who were always meant to find us, even if they come wrapped in the wrong blanket, with the right name. The next morning came soft and gray. Fog drifted low over the parking lot as James and Lena stepped outside the hospital, cups of lukewarm coffee in their hands. They hadn't slept. Neither had spoken much since the nurse confirmed the truth. There were two babies, switched, born in the same small-town clinic 6 months earlier. Elijah, James's grandson by blood, had been given to Lena, and the other child, the one sleeping now in the NICU, wrapped in that green blanket, was hers. Lena sat on the curb, knees pulled to her chest. James stood behind her, quiet, hands in his coat pockets, as if the weight of what had happened lived there. I don't know how to do this, Lena said, her voice hollow. They're both mine, and neither is. James took a slow breath. There's no right answer here, Lena. Only honest ones. She looked up at him, tears held tight. What if I can't love them both? He didn't flinch, just knelt beside her. Then love the one in front of you. Start there. Inside, the social worker had a folder on her lap. She explained the options slowly, carefully, as if choosing the right words could make any of this easier. Custody evaluations, DNA results, foster considerations, visitation paths. Lena barely heard her. All she could see was 2 cribs, 2 babies, 2 mothers, one buried, one barely more than a child. And between them, James. He hadn't asked for this. He'd buried a daughter, lost a grandson, built a life inside his own silence. And now, here he was, offering her his last good years without asking for anything back. Lena's voice cracked. What if I walk away? James blinked, surprised. What do you mean? She looked at the floor. What if I let you take him? Elijah, your grandson. You've lost enough. I'd understand if... But before she could finish, James stopped her. No, he said it firm, but kind. No, Lena. That boy cried for you every night. Reached for you, he knows you. But he's yours. And he's yours too. Maybe not by blood, but by every midnight bottle, every lullaby, every time you stayed when no one else would. He sat back. Do you think I care whose veins he came from? That child calls your scent home. Lena's shoulders crumpled. It was later that afternoon, just as the fog began to lift, that the nurse wheeled Elijah into a private room. Beside him, in a clear crib, was the other baby, Lena's by blood. The two lay side by side, one reaching in his sleep, the other turning his head, drawn to the warmth. Lena stood in the doorway, tears streaming quietly now, James at her side. "They're both mine," she whispered. James nodded. "And I think," she added, "they might both be yours too." Outside, a robin landed on the hospital sign, peering in. Spring wasn't here yet, but the cold was softening. Inside that quiet room, a cradle became two, one held by blood, the other by something deeper. But as Lena reached down to stroke her son's cheek, the door opened behind her, and a voice said something she hadn't expected to hear. "Is this where they brought him?" She turned around slowly, and standing there, suitcase in hand, tears already falling, was a woman Lena had never seen before. But James had, and his voice broke as he whispered her name. "Anna, sometimes healing walks in long after you've given up waiting, and sometimes it carries a suitcase." She stood in the doorway like she didn't know if she belonged. Hair wind-tossed, jacket too thin for the chill, one hand on the strap of her bag, the other clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. Lena didn't move. James stood frozen, the air around him thick with memory. It was the nurse who spoke first. "You're Anna Bennett?" The woman nodded slowly, eyes locked on Elijah. "I got a message from a woman in records. Said something was found, a mistake, that a child matched my file." Her voice cracked. "They said he might be mine." James stepped forward, not fast, not with anger, but with that quiet ache of a man who had waited too long to hope. "Anna," he said, voice soft. She turned toward him, startled. "Dad?" That word hadn't been spoken between them in over 10 years. Not since the funeral. Not since Sarah, James's wife, Anna's mother, had passed in the middle of one silent morning, leaving behind a kitchen full of folded laundry and a daughter who'd been packing for college. Grief tore the house in half that day, and Anna had left, letters unanswered, voicemails ignored, the silence between them growing like vines across a house no one had lived in since. Now she was here, standing in front of the man who raised her, and the baby she never thought she'd get to meet. The nurse brought her a chair. Anna sat slowly, eyes never leaving Elijah. Lena stood beside the crib, unsure if she should move. Her body blocked half the light from reaching the baby, part of her still guarding, even now. "I didn't know," Anna whispered. "They told me he died, that there were complications during delivery. I was sedated. When I woke up, he was gone." Her hand trembled as she reached out, didn't touch him, just hovered there. Lena finally spoke. I think he's known your name all this time." Anna looked up. Lena continued, voice barely audible. "Sometimes, when he'd cry at night, I'd say, 'You're safe, Mama's here,' and he'd stop. But it always felt like he was waiting for someone else." Anna nodded, tears falling. "I was broken," she said. "After, I moved to Charleston, worked 2 jobs. I tried not to think about him because I thought I'd die if I did. But then last week, I got a call from a stranger. She said the hospital had uncovered something, that a baby had been misplaced. My name was still on file." She looked at James. "I almost didn't come." James's eyes welled. "But you did." Anna's gaze shifted back to Lena. "I don't want to take him away from you," she said. Lena stepped closer. Gently, she placed Elijah's hand into Anna's. "You're not taking him," Lena said. "You're just coming home." That night, the 3 of them sat in the quiet room. Anna cradled Elijah. Lena watched her child, her own by birth, sleeping in the crib beside them. James stood near the window, watching the lights flicker in the parking lot, a hand resting on the frame like he was holding back time. No one said much, but there was a softness to it all, like something had finally been allowed to breathe. Later, as Lena stepped into the hallway to call the nurse, she passed by the family waiting area. A boy sat there, maybe 16, alone, dirty sneakers, hoodie pulled tight. She almost kept walking, until he looked up, and she saw something in his eyes, something that looked like hers had, months ago. Lost, tired, holding on to something small. And that's when he asked, "You got a baby in there?" Sometimes, just when one cradle settles, another begins to rock. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hoodie was damp from the rain, and his hands trembled just enough to notice. One knee bounced in place like he was trying to outrun whatever had caught him. Lena paused. Something in her stilled. I do, she said softly. I've got a baby in there. The boy nodded, not quite meeting her eyes. That's good. You waiting on someone? She asked. He hesitated, then shrugged. My girlfriend had a baby, he said. 3 nights ago. Lena waited. She left this morning, he added, staring at the floor. Took her stuff. Left him here. A silence settled between them. She didn't want him, he said, almost to himself. Said she thought she did. But she didn't. And now they're asking me questions I don't know how to answer. Like what formula he needs. If I have a crib. If I know how to hold him right. He rubbed his face with both hands. I'm 16, he whispered. I don't even have a driver's license. Lena sat down beside him. She didn't say it. But part of her heart cracked wide open. Because not long ago, she'd been in that same chair. No clue what to do. Only this time it was a boy holding the silence. You know his name? She asked gently. He nodded. Tommy. That's a good name. He looked at her. Finally. Eyes rimmed red. She told me to let the nurses take him. Said I could walk away now and no one would blame me. He waited, then added, Do you think that's true? Lena thought of that motel room, the one with the red flowered bedspread, and the baby wrapped in green. She thought of Elijah, and how she had whispered his name for months, before anyone knew he wasn't hers. I think people walk away all the time, she said. But not because they're heartless, just because they're scared. He swallowed hard. I don't want to be scared. You already are, she said gently. But you stayed. That counts. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I don't have anyone. No mom. No place to take him. They said they'll call child services if I don't figure something out by tomorrow. And Lena said the words before she even realized she meant them. I might know someone. That night, James returned to the motel. He needed a moment. To think. To breathe. To stare at the walls that had heard the first cries of his grandson. When Lena called, he answered on the first ring. There's a boy, she said. He's young. He's scared. He's got nothing but a baby and a name. James listened, heart already softening. And you're thinking what, exactly? He asked. Lena smiled faintly through the line. I'm thinking, maybe you've got room in that big house of yours, the one with the extra crib you were too afraid to put away. He didn't answer right away. Then, bring him by. Back at the hospital, the boy stood in the nursery, staring down at his son. Tommy yawned, blinked up at him like the world hadn't broken yet. Hey, buddy, the boy whispered. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm still here. Lena stood in the doorway, and behind her, James, older, slower, but steady. The boy turned, startled. James gave him a small nod. You like stew? He asked. The boy looked confused. I guess. Good, James said. That's where we'll start. Sometimes family doesn't come the way we expect. Sometimes it knocks with shaking hands and gets answered with an old man, a tired girl, and a second cradle waiting in a quiet house. James hadn't opened the front door in over a year. Not really opened it. He'd gone in and out, sure. Groceries, bills, mail that mostly went unopened. But tonight, as Lena pulled into the gravel driveway with that nervous boy in the passenger seat, James did more than open the door. He stood in it, like he was making room. The porch light flickered overhead. The screen door creaked like it remembered happier years. And just inside, against the pale yellow wall, sat the old wooden cradle, clean, empty. Until now. The boy's name was Cole. He carried Tommy in both arms, bundled tight, like he was afraid someone might take him if he blinked. James met him halfway down the steps. You drive? He asked. Cole shook his head. Not yet. James nodded. Good. I hate riding shotgun. Lena smiled faintly. She knew what James was doing. He wasn't offering charity. He was offering dignity. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and old linen. The kitchen clock ticked steady on the wall, and the floorboards creaked in familiar ways Lena hadn't realized she missed until just now. James had already pulled out 2 baby blankets, one blue, one green. He placed them side by side in the den, on the same patchwork rug where Anna used to play as a child. The sight of it made Lena's throat ache. Cole stood at the edge of the room like he didn't know where to place his feet. James gestured toward the recliner. You sit. I'll heat the stew. Cole opened his mouth to protest, then sat. In the kitchen, Lena followed James quietly. "You sure about this?" she asked, keeping her voice low. James ladled soup into 2 chip bowls, hands steady. "I've got heat. I've got spoons. I've got time." He looked up. "That boy has a baby. That's all the math I need." She nodded, swallowed back something warm and hard, then asked what had been pressing on her since the hospital. "Do you think Anna'll stay?" James paused, wiped the edge of the bowl with a cloth. "I don't know," he said. "But I think she came back because something told her it was safe to." Lena leaned against the doorframe. "She said she's not ready to be a mother." James turned toward her. "You weren't either." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Still not some days." And then, quietly, "But I want to be." That night, 2 babies slept side by side for the first time. Elijah, the child who had been passed between lives, now home in his grandfather's arms, and Tommy, the newborn held close by, a boy who had nothing, until someone opened a door. Lena sat on the porch, wrapped in James's flannel jacket. She could hear Cole inside, whispering a lullaby to a child who didn't know yet how lucky he was to be chosen. Anna had gone to the motel for the night. She needed space, needed quiet. But she promised to return in the morning, and Lena believed her. James stepped onto the porch, 2 mugs in hand. "Hot cocoa," he said. "Don't tell the boy it's from a packet." She took it, smiling. "I didn't think this was the life I'd have," she said. James stared into the dark. "I thought I'd die in silence." They sipped quietly, and somewhere from deep inside the house, a baby cried. Neither of them moved right away, because sometimes just hearing that cry means you're alive. Sometimes a house isn't just a place to sleep. Sometimes it's a second cradle. The sun came slow, soft gold through the lace curtains, dust dancing in it like memory. The kind of light that makes you stop in the middle of pouring coffee, just to watch the way it lands on the floor. Lena was already awake. Elijah stirred in her arms, warm, fed, and dreaming. His little hand curled around her thumb like he meant to keep her there forever. In the other room, Cole snored gently on the couch. 1 foot half off the edge, Tommy tucked against his chest. A bottle still rested beside him, tilted and empty. And James stood in the kitchen, humming low, same tune he used to hum when Sarah was alive. The kettle whistled soft. The smell of cinnamon toast filled the air like comfort, made visible. Lena closed her eyes. She hadn't felt this safe since before the motel. The door opened just before 8. Anna stepped in, hair still damp from the shower, jacket zipped. Her eyes scanned the room slowly, like she was memorizing it. Every corner, every sound. She walked toward Lena without speaking, and reached down to touch Elijah's head. "He looks like my mother," she whispered. "Right around the nose." Lena smiled. "He likes to kick in his sleep." Anna nodded. So did I. They didn't say what either was thinking. That this child was held by 2 women, both shaped by loss, both stronger now than when they began. James appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Morning, sweetheart," he said. Anna looked at him. Then, with a voice smaller than the one she'd used at the hospital, she said, "I don't know what I'm doing, Dad." He didn't try to fix it, didn't offer advice or empty words. He just stepped forward and hugged her, not like a fix, but like a return. She held on for a long time. Later, Lena found herself in the backyard, watching the babies nap in the playpen James had pulled from the attic. It still smelled faintly of cedar and a little dust, but the sun was warm on their blankets. Anna sat beside her. They passed a thermos between them, 1 sip at a time. "I had a dream last night," Anna said, "that I was back in that delivery room. But this time, I didn't leave." Lena looked at her. "I think part of me thought you'd want to take him, that you'd want to erase everything I did wrong." Anna shook her head. "I don't want to erase anything. I want to understand it." She looked at Elijah sleeping, peaceful now. "You're the only mama he's ever known. That matters." Lena wiped a tear before it could fall. "So what do we do?" Anna smiled, soft and tired. "We raise him, together." That afternoon, James made grilled cheese. Cole washed bottles in the sink. Anna folded tiny clothes in the sunroom. And Lena, she sat in the rocker out front, humming, 1 hand on Elijah's chest, the other holding a notebook, the kind that girls once used for doodles and daydreams. Only now she was writing down feeding schedules, nap times, doctor names, and at the top of the page, in big block letters, our boys. Underneath it, 2 names, Elijah Bennett, Tommy Lane, and in the corner, smaller, almost a whisper, second Cradle. Sometimes you don't start over with nothing. You start with almost nothing, and someone who stays. But just as the light began to dip, and the day folded itself in gently, a knock came at the door. 3 soft raps. James answered, and standing there, holding a clipboard and a badge, was a woman from Child Services. "I'm here," she said, "for a home visit. Because even when the heart begins to heal, the world still asks its questions." The woman from Child Services was polite, but firm. Her name was Miss Halbrook. Early 40s, pressed blouse, kind eyes. The sort of person who has seen too much to be surprised by anything, and too much to pretend paperwork tells the whole story. James welcomed her in with a nod, offered her coffee. She declined. Cole stood awkwardly near the mantel, bouncing Tommy in his arms like the rhythm might settle something in both of them. Lena sat with Elijah on her hip, heart pounding. Anna stood behind the rocker, quiet, watchful, ready. Miss Halbrook opened a folder on her lap. "I'm here to assess the welfare of 2 minors, Elijah Bennett and Thomas Lane," she said gently. "We've been informed of a custody discrepancy regarding Elijah's birth, as well as concerns around Mr. Lane's age and preparedness to care for an infant." James cleared his throat. "With respect," he said, "they're not paperwork to us. They're people. They're home." Miss Halbrook looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe that," she said. "But the system doesn't move on belief. It moves on evidence." She moved through the house slowly, checked the fridge, full, inspected the nursery, freshly cleaned, stocked with diapers, with 2 cribs now, side by side, both babies sleeping. She asked questions. To Lena, "Are you legally emancipated?" "Not yet," Lena answered. "But I've started the process. I've got a file from social services, and James is helping me hire a lawyer." To Cole, "Do you intend to raise Thomas on your own?" He looked at the floor, then at James, then back. "No," he said. "I've got help now." To Anna, "And you? Do you plan to take Elijah?" Anna's throat worked. "I plan to be his mother," she said, "in whatever way doesn't undo what he already knows." Miss Halbrook looked at her sharply. "That's a rare answer." Anna nodded. "It's a rare boy." Finally, she sat back down in the living room, closed the folder, looked around. Cole was rocking Tommy near the fire. Lena was gently patting Elijah's back, humming low. Anna was folding a blanket she hadn't unfolded. James sat with his hands resting on his knees, not begging, not convincing, just ready. And Miss Halbrook smiled. "You know," she said, "I've walked into homes with clean walls and polished furniture and not a single scrap of love inside." She looked at them all. "This place?" she said. "This place has stew on the stove and soft voices in every room." She reached into her bag and pulled out 2 temporary guardianship papers. One for Lena, one for Cole. Full rights, 30 days. After that, you'll need to file jointly with Mr. Bennett if you wish to retain custody while we sort out the long-term plan. James took the papers gently. "We will." Miss Halbrook stood, packed her folder, and gave a soft nod, then added almost as an afterthought, "And I wouldn't change a thing about that green blanket on Elijah's crib. Looks like love lives there." When she left, no one moved for a long while. Then Lena exhaled, slow and long. James leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, like someone finally allowed to rest. Cole whispered something to Tommy, and Anna knelt in front of Elijah's crib and whispered something he wouldn't remember, but would feel. Outside, dusk turned the sky to lavender. Inside, the light stayed soft. No one said the word family out loud. They didn't need to. It was already in the way the doors stayed open, in the 2 bowls, warming on the stove, in the shoes left by the mat, small and muddy, in the names written in crayon on the fridge. But just as James rose to turn off the porch light, the phone rang. Not a cell, not a text, the old landline. He picked it up slowly, and a voice said, "Is this where Elijah Bennett is staying?" James froze. "Yes. Who's asking?" The voice paused. and then said something that turned his whole world sideways. I'm his father. Some stories take a lifetime to arrive at the truth, and some truths come in the final hour. James held the phone to his ear, his heart thudding like it had when Anna was born. The man's voice was low, steady, not young, not angry, just tired. I didn't know, he said. I never knew she was pregnant. I joined the Coast Guard, left town before the rumors even started. If I'd known. He trailed off. James didn't interrupt. I got a call from a friend last night, the man continued. Said there was a boy. My name might be on a birth record. Said he was here. James looked at the sleeping child in the crib. Elijah, wrapped in the green blanket, one hand resting against his cheek, like he was dreaming of something gentle. Yes, James said. He's here. The voice on the other end softened. Is he okay? James smiled faintly. He's better than okay. Later that night, James sat out on the porch. The stars were clear above, scattered like ash across dark velvet. Lena stepped out beside him, carrying 2 mugs of warm milk. Was it him? She asked quietly. James nodded. He's coming next week. He just wants to see him. Are you worried? James thought about it, then shook his head. I think Elijah will be loved by more people than most children get in a lifetime. That's not a worry. That's a blessing. Lena smiled. He has 2 mothers. One who gave him life. One who stayed. James looked at her, eyes kind. And 2 fathers. One who found him late, and one who never let him go. They sat in silence for a while, until Lena said softly, I think I'd like to stay. James turned to her. I mean, long term. Here, if you'll have me. He didn't answer right away, just reached out and took her hand in his. In the weeks that followed, the house filled in, with bottles and laundry and giggles from the playpen. Anna moved into the spare room. Cole started working part-time at the hardware store down the road. Lena signed up for GED classes, evening shifts, after the boys were tucked in. And James planted marigolds under the windows. He hadn't done that since Sarah passed. They never drew strict lines around who was whose. Tommy called James Pop before anyone asked him to. Elijah reached for Anna when he was hurt, and for Lena when he was tired. Sometimes when Cole didn't know what to do, James would hand him a warm towel and say, just start with kindness. It was a house built on second chances and soft places to land. One morning, Elijah toddled into the living room holding a spoon like a sword, blanket trailing behind him. Anna looked up from her coffee and smiled. Knight of the green blanket, she whispered. Lena laughed. Protector of cribs and snack time. Cole added, defender of naptime justice. James just leaned back in his chair, eyes crinkled, heart full. You see, some stories don't end with weddings or riches. Some end with a porch light still burning, a baby breathing steady beside a rocking chair, and a house where 4 lost souls, all broken in different ways, found something sacred, a reason to stay. So if you've ever loved a child that didn't come from your body, if you've ever stayed when leaving would have been easier, if you've ever held someone else's sorrow like it was your own, then you know this story. It's yours too. Some stories don't end with a kiss. They end with a cradle and the courage to build another. A second cradle. If this story found a little corner of your heart, leave a comment, will you? The porch light's always on here at Second Cradle. Would you like me to bundle the full story into one file for you?